Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss what might be the most serious Tory scandal to break for, well, at least a few days, as a report alleges that the Treasury, at a time when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor, helped the head of the Russian private army Wagner sue a British journalist by letting him bypass sanctions against him in the UK. If true, this would be even worse than taking money from Putin's network in return for dubious favours and influence. This would be a very conscious, deliberate case of allowing someone who is now rampaging through Ukraine to committing the most terrible atrocities to circumvent our own justice system in order to attack a journalist. I mean, this should destroy any notion that either Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak are on Ukraine's side here. This is genuinely a government-breaking scandal. As such, I don't necessarily expect it to appear in the mainstream media for a good decade or more. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. Now, first thing to point out is that this isn't another part of the briefing war. You may think, oh, this is spicing up again. You know, Johnson briefs this and then Sunak briefs this. This is not part of the briefing war. This information has not come from the UK side. And it is potentially damaging to both Sunak and Johnson. Seriously damaging. So neither would want this to be known. But what we have here is a massive scandal. In many other advanced economies, you would say this is like the biggest scandal for years, maybe even decades. In the UK, however, all I can say is it's the biggest scandal since the weekend. I'll also say from the start that the problem is, like, when the mainstream media don't pick up a story, and they may at some point, this is just really broken, you know, if they don't, you have a problem. See, our mainstream media is mostly either fairly or very biased, you know, in some, though not all cases, actively pushing the agenda of their owner. You know, there is varying degrees of editorial control. A single person determining the single angle from which their outlet will present any news in several of them. And if that angle has a blind spot for certain news stories, they won't be covered at all. But when the mainstream media do publish a story, and it really doesn't matter who it is, you can be fairly sure that the stated facts of the matter are very likely to be true. The overall picture the headline especially gives, if not the article, may be highly misleading. For example, there was a recent flurry of articles about Leo Varadkar expressing regret that the people of Northern Ireland were not given any say over the Northern Ireland Protocol. This was, of course, a failure of the Westminster government to include them. It's not for the Irish government to do so. But quite a lot of outlets presented their headlines in a way that Varadkar was expressing personal regret for his own role in the affair. It's like, no. And if you read the articles, it's quite clear that the headline doesn't give quite the same impression as the content. This happens quite a lot. Very frequently with the likes of the Daily Express on one side of the scale. Not so frequently with the Guardian or the Independent, but they do still dabble from time to time. But that aside, I've picked this potential scandal up from Open Democracy. Now, this is a good source of news. I believe it's genuine. But the allegation, and I mean the outlet's genuine, not just this story. I think this story is definitely genuine. But the allegations are so serious that I would just want some others to run with it in the mainstream media. You know, the allegations relate to Yevgeny Prigozhin. I'm not sure I'll be pronouncing that correctly, sorry. But is one of Putin's oligarchs. He's the founder of the Wagner group, which is growing in notoriety. It's the private army currently running riot in Ukraine. As I say, committing the most terrible war crimes. You know, I'd read last week that a former officer in the outfit has claimed asylum, I think in Finland, and is willing to testify against what the group has been doing. You know, what this group does, it recruits people like from prisons and so on, wherever they can get them. Obviously very poor training, it's just bodies. And they're just looters, bandits. You know, many members of the public do not really know much about them right now. But when the war's over, when the serious investigations on the ground start taking place, start uncovering the atrocities, the public will know about them then. You know, this group will become truly infamous in a few years. It sort of reminds me of Al-Qaeda, because I remember reading about those many years before 9/11. And about the destruction of archaeological artifacts. They were trying to wipe out a lot of Afghan culture. That's when I first became, aware of them. And then 9/11, then everyone became aware of them. But it isn't just the terrors unleashed in Ukraine that attracted condemnation. He was under sanctions years ago because his Wagner group had been running guns in Libya, as well as a few other issues. Well, Open Democracy claims that a load of emails hacked from Russian companies since the invasion of Ukraine shows that the Treasury issued a special license to Prigozhin in 2021. Rishi Sunak was Chancellor at the time. The article doesn't allege direct involvement from Sunak himself. Presumably his name does not appear in the emails that have been hacked. That being said, if the Treasury allowed a special license to someone sanctioned like this, then it would suggest, well, one of two things to me. First, that Sunak must have been involved. Surely no official would do this without their Secretary of State's approval. In theory, you might say, well, maybe Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, at the behest of one of his Russian agent drinking buddies, bypassed Sunak. But even then, you'd think he would involve Sunak rather than try to order officials directly without the Chancellor knowing in his own department. Or maybe I keep looking at this through the lens of Tory corruption, because that's the obvious one to do. We know that they're in the pockets of the Kremlin. We look no further for evidence of that than Johnson ramming through objections against Evgeny Lebedev being elevated to the House of Lords, or his attempts, unsuccessful in the end, to prevent the damaging Russian interference report being published. But maybe Sunak's got personal skin in the game regarding his wife's commercial interests in Moscow. Who knows? The second possibility, which would be dreadful to consider, is that this was driven by an official without the Chancellor's knowledge. That would suggest that Putin has corrupted our civil service as well as government. If that were true, there would need to be a serious criminal investigation into this case. But I suspect the first possibility is way more likely. Apart from anything else, if it were caused by an official, there'd be no issue with the government, now that it knows that this story's out in the open, ordering an immediate investigation, knowing that there won't be any comeback for any Tory ministers for once. That being said, Open Democracy approached the government for comment about this, and they said that they wouldn't respond. Elliot Higgins, a British journalist for Bellingcat, some of you may know, was sued by Prigozhin after Higgins published damaging articles about the Wagner Group. The articles in Open Democracy suggest that Prigozhin wanted to sue Higgins in the UK rather than the Netherlands, where his outlet was based, because he'd be more likely to cause more damage and do himself more good. As it happened, the case collapsed in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and Prigozhin's lawyers withdrew from the case. You can, of course, read all the details, including various interesting motivations for the legal case, in the actual article, which, of course, I will link in the description below as usual. But what is concerning here is that the British government, at some level, have gone out of their way to allow a very serious criminal to bypass our own sanctions in order to target a journalist. And this very much has shades of the recording of Boris Johnson helping a friend try and have a journalist beaten up all those years ago. Only on this occasion, it's not clear why the government would do this. I mean, it is to some of you, but in isolation, why do it? This isn't allowing a journalist to be attacked to protect the reputation of a Tory, or even to do a favour for a Tory pal from Eton. It would suggest that the money that Putin's inner circle has been pumping into British politics over the years has done more than just buy them a bit of influence. Actually allows them to just get on the phone and order our government to do its bidding whenever they want. The implications of even the allegations here are horrifying. The article quotes Labour MP Margaret Hodge, who chairs the Anti-Corruption and Responsible Tax Group. She said that it's ludicrous that the government stands accused of evading the sanctions it itself imposed. So I'm guessing there'll be further questions in Parliament about this. I'm afraid it's probably going to be one of those cases of an earth-shattering scandal not really making it into public knowledge, at least not in a timely manner, because we're going to be distracted by other more, they are serious scandals. Some of them maybe are more serious, some not so much. But not on this level of institutional corruption. Because I've got a question. I don't seriously doubt that this was driven by at least one of the two most senior members of the government at the time, if not both. And as I said, we don't know this because of a leak at our end. My question is, why not? Why didn't someone leak this? It's of the most intense public interest. It's possible that it might gain some traction if a major outlet takes a look at it. It's equally possible that the government is so mired in so much sleaze and corruption now that it just gets lost in the swamp. It'll probably be reported to the wider public in a panorama expose in 20 years or something, when those involved are either dead or retired. But if we don't get any serious answers here, what are we to conclude? That the Conservative Party is essentially just the Westminster branch of the Kremlin now? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.